Alright, so I'm going to try this again. I've had a bad headache most of the day, on and off, and I tried to read earlier. I did chapter 4, but my eyes were terrible. I've had a lot of vision problem today too, so uh, very tired. It's almost 11, but I'm going to try to read at least 2 or 3 chapters here. Need to get some read every day, at least 2, 3 chapters at the very least. I should be reading like 5. But anyways, first Maccabees chapter 4. I should do better this time, seeing I just read it once a little while ago, maybe an hour ago. Then took Gorgias 5,000 footmen and 1,000 of the best horsemen, and removed out of the camp by night, to the end he might rush in upon the camp of the Jews and smite them suddenly. And the men of the fortress were his guides. Now when Judas heard thereof, he himself removed, and the valiant men with him, that he might smite the king's army which was at Emos, while as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp. In the mean season came Gorgias by night into the camp of Judas, and when he found no man there, he sought them in the mountains, for these fellows flee from us. But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plain with 3,000 men, and who nevertheless had neither armor nor sword to their minds. And they saw the camp of the heathen, that it was strong and well harnessed, and compassed round about with horsemen, and these were expert of war. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, fear ye not their multitude, neither be ye afraid of their assault. Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea. Remember Pharaoh pursued them with an army. Now therefore let us cry unto heaven, if peradventure the Lord will have mercy upon us, and remember the covenant of our fathers, and destroy this host before our face this day, that so all the heathen may know that there is one who delivereth and saveth Israel. Then the strangers lifted up their eyes, and saw them coming over against them. Wherefore they went out of the camp to battle, but they that were with Judas sounded their trumpets. So they joined battle, and the heathen, being discomfited, fled into the plain. Howbeit all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword, for they pursued them unto Gazara, and unto the plains of Idumea, and Azotus, and Jamia, so that there were slain of them upon a 3,000 men. This done, Judas returned again with his host from pursuing them, and said to the people, Be not greedy of the spoil, inasmuch as there is battle before us. And Gorgias and his hosts are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies, and overcome them, and after this ye may boldly take the spoils. Sorry, try to get comfortable so I don't make my neck worse. Uh-oh. Alright, where was I? Alright, I'm just going to start at 16. I'm sorry, I have a severe brain fog too. I can't. The last few days have been difficult in this house. Okay, 17. And said to the people, Be not greedy of the spoil, inasmuch as there is a battle before us. I couldn't find it. And Gorgias and his host are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies, and overcome them, and after this ye may boldly take the spoils. As Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out of the mountain, who, when they perceived that the Jews had put their host to flight, and were burning the tents, for the smoke that was seen declared that what was done. When therefore they perceived these things, they were sore afraid, and seeing also the host of Judas in the plain ready to fight, they fled every one into the land of strangers. Then Judas returned to spoil the tents, where they got much gold and silver, blue silk, purple of the sea, and great riches. After this they went home, and sung a song of thanksgiving, and praised the Lord in heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endureth forever. Thus Israel had a great deliverance that day, and many other days. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Lysias what had happened, who, when he heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he would were done unto Israel, nor such thing as the king commanded him were come to pass. The next year, therefore, following, Lysias gathered together 70,000 choice men of foot, and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. So they came into Idumea, and pitched their tents at Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. And when he saw that mighty army, he prayed and said, Blessed art thou, O Saviour of Israel, who didst quell the violence of the mighty men by the hand of thy servant David, and gavest the host of strangers into the hands of Jonathan the son of Saul, and his armor-bearer. Shut up this army in the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and horsemen. Make them to be of no courage, and cause the boldness of their strength to fall away, and let them quake at their destruction. Cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and let all those that know thy name praise thee with thanksgiving. So they joined battle, and there were slain of the host of Lysias about 5,000 men. Even before them were they slain. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judah's soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia, and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he proposed to come again into Judea. Then said Judas and his brethren, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Upon this all the host assembled themselves together, and went up into Mount Sion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profaned, and the gates burned up, and shrubs growing in the courts, as in a forest, or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priests' chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes, and made great lamentation, and cast ashes upon their heads, and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets, and cried toward heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress, until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary, and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned, they thought it best to put it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down, and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show them what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the law, and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hallowed the courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick, and the altar of burnt offerings, and of incense, and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table, and spread out the veils, and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 5th and 20th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning, and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it, even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshipping and praising the God of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold, and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed, and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month, Caslu, and with mirth and gladness. At that time also they builded up the Mount Sion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. And they set there a garrison to keep it, and fortified Bethsura to preserve it, and the people might have a defense against Idumea. Chapter 5. Now when the nations round about heard that the altar was built and the sanctuary renewed as before, it displeased them very much. Wherefore they thought to destroy the generation of Jacob that was among them, and thereupon they began to slay and destroy the people. Then Judas fought against the children of Esau in Idumea at Arabatine, because they besieged Gaal, and he gave them a great overthrow, and abated their courage, and took their spoils. Also he remembered the injury of the children of Ben, who had been a snare and an offense unto the people, and that they lay in wait for them in the ways. He shut them up therefore in the towers, and encamped against them, and destroyed them utterly, and burned the towers of that place with fire, and all that were therein. Afterward he passed over to the children of Ammon, where he found a mighty power and much people, with Timotheus their captain. So he fought many battles with them, till at length they were discomfited before him, and he smote them. And when he had taken Jazar, with the towns belonging thereto, he returned into Judea. Then the heathen that were at Gilad assembled themselves together against the Israelites that were in their quarters, to destroy them, but they fled to the fortress of Dathema, and sent letters unto Judas and his brethren. The heathen that are around about us are assembled together against us to destroy us, and they are preparing to come and take the fortress whereunto we are fled, Timotheus being captain of their host. Come now therefore, and deliver us from their hands, for many of us are slain. Yea, all our brethren that were in the places of Tobi are put to death. Their wives and their children also they have carried away captives, and borne away their stuff. And they have destroyed there about 1,000 men. While these letters were yet reading, behold, there came other messengers from Galilee, with their clothes rent, and who reported on this wise. And said they to Ptolemus, and of Tyrus and Sidon, and all Galilee of the Gentiles, are assembled together against us to consume us. Now when Judas and the people heard these words, there assembled a great congregation together to consult what they should do for their brethren that were in trouble and assaulted of them. Then said Judas unto Simon his brother, Choose thee out men, and go and deliver thy brethren that are in Galilee. For I and Jonathan my brother will go into the country of Gilad. So he left Joseph the son of Zacharias, and Azarias, captains of the people, with the remnant of the host in Judea to keep it. unto whom he gave commandment, saying, Take ye the charge of this people, and see that ye may not war against the heathen until the time that we come in, till the time that we come again. Now unto Simon, sorry, my eyes are terrible, were given 3,000 men to go into Galilee, and unto Judas 8,000 men for the country of Galilee. Then went Simon into Galilee, where he fought many battles with the heathen, so that the heathen were discomfited by him. And he pursued them unto the gate of Ptolemais. And there were slain of the heathen about 3,000 men, whose spoils he took. And those that were in Galilee and in Arbadas, with their wives and their children, and all they had, took he away with him, and brought them into Judea with great joy. Judas Maccabees also and his brother Jonathan went over Jordan, and traveled 3 days' journeys in the wilderness, where they met with Nabathites, who came unto them in peaceable manner, and told them everything had happened to their brethren in the land of Galilee, and how that many of them were shut up in Bosora and Bozer and Elima, Casphir, Maked, and Carnaim. All these cities are strong and great. And that they were shut up in the rest of the cities of the country of Galilee, and that against tomorrow they had appointed to bring their hosts against the forts, and to take them and to destroy them all in one day. Hereupon Judas and his host turned suddenly by the way of the wilderness unto Bosora, and when he had won the city, he slew all the males with the edge of the sword, and took all their spoils, and burned the city with fire. From whence he removed by night, and went till he came to the fortress. And betimes in the morning they looked up, and behold, there was an innumerable people bearing ladders, and other engines of war, to take the fortress, for they assaulted them. When Judas therefore saw that the battle was begun, and that the cry of the city went up to heaven, with trumpets and a great sound, he said unto his host, Fight this day for your brethren. So he went forth behind them in 3 companies, and sounded their trumpets, and cried with prayer. Then the host of Timotheus, knowing that it was Maccabees, fled from him, wherefore he smote them with a great slaughter, so that there were killed of them that day about 8,000 men. This done, Judah turned aside to Maspha, and after he had assaulted it, he took and slew all the males therein, and received the spoils thereof, and burnt it with fire. From thence went he and took Casphon, Magid, Bozer, and the other cities of the country of Galilee. After these things gathered Timotheus another host in a camp against Raphon beyond the brook. So Judas sent men to Espy the host, who brought him word, saying, All the heathen that be round about us are assembled unto them, even a very great host. He hath also hired the Arabians to help them, and they have pitched their tents beyond the brook, ready to come and fight against thee. Upon this Judas went to meet them. Then Timotheus said unto the captains of his host, When Judas and his host come near the brook, if he pass over first unto us, we shall not be able to withstand him, for he will mightily prevail against us. But if he be afraid and camp beyond the river, we shall go over unto him and prevail against him. Now when Judas came near the brook, he caused the scribes of the people to remain by the brook, unto whom he gave commandment, saying, Suffer no man to remain in the camp, but let all come to the battle. So he went first over unto them, and all the people after him. Then all the heathen, being discomfited before him, cast away their weapons, and fled unto the temple that was at Carnaim. But they took the city, and burned the temple with all that were therein. Thus was Carnaim subdued, neither could they stand any longer before Judas. Then Judas gathered together all the Israelites that were in the country of Galilee, from the least unto the greatest, even their wives and their children and their stuff, a very great host, to the end they might come into the land of Judea. Now when they came unto Ephron, This was a great city in the way, as they should go, very well fortified. They could not turn from it, either on the right hand or the left, but must needs pass through the midst of it. Then they of the city shut them out, and stopped up the gates with stones. Whereupon Judas sent unto them in peaceable manner, saying, Let us pass through your land to go into our own country, and none shall do you any hurt. We will only pass through on foot. Howbeit they would not open unto him. Wherefore Judas commanded a proclamation to be made throughout the host, that every man should pitch his tent in the place where he was. So the soldiers pitched and assaulted the city all that day and all that night, till at the length the city was delivered into his hands, who then slew all the males with the edge of the sword, and razed the city, and took the spoils thereof, and passed through the city over them that were slain. After this went they over Jordan into the great plain before Bethsan. And Judas gathered together those that came behind, and exhorted the people all the way through, till they came into the land of Judea. So they went up to Mount Sion with great joy and gladness, where they offered burnt offerings, because not one of them were slain until they had returned in peace. Now what time as Judas and Jonathan were in the land of Galilee, and Simon his brother in Galilee before Ptolemais. Joseph and the son of Zacharias, and Azarias, captains of the garrisons, heard of the valiant acts and warlike deeds which they had done. Wherefore they said, Let us also get us a name, and go fight against the heathen that are round about us. So when they had given charge unto the garrison that was with them, they went toward Jamnia. Then came Gorgias and his men out of the city to fight against them. And so it was that Joseph and Azarias were put to flight, and pursued unto the borders of Judea. And there were slain that day of the people of Israel about 2,000 men. Thus was there a great overthrow among the children of Israel, because they were not obedient unto Judas and his brethren, but thought to do some valiant act. Moreover, these men came not of the seed of those by whose hand deliverance was given unto Israel. Howbeit the man Judas and his brethren were greatly renowned in the sight of all Israel, and of all the heathen wheresoever their name was heard of, insomuch as the people assembled unto them with joyful acclamations. After went Judas forth with his brethren, and fought against the children of Esau in the land toward the south, where he smote Hebron and the towns thereof, and pulled down the fortress of it, and burned the towers thereof round about. From thence he moved to go into the land of the Philistines, and passed through Samaria. At that time certain priests, desirous to show their valor, went slain in battle, for that they were out to fight unadvisedly. So Judas turned to Azotus in the land of the Philistines, and when he had pulled down their altars, and burned their carved images with fire, and spoiled their cities, he returned into the land of Judea. About that time King Antiochus, traveling through the high countries, heard say that Elymas in the country of Persia was a city greatly renowned for riches, silver, and gold, and that there was in it a very rich temple, wherein were coverings of gold, and breastplates and shields, which Alexander son of Philip, the Macedonian king, who reigned first among the Grecians, had left there. Wherefore he came and sought to take the city and to spoil it, but he was not able, because they of the city, having had warning thereof, rose up against him in battle, so that he fled and departed thence with great heaviness, and returned to Babylon. Moreover, there came one who brought him tidings into Persia, that the armies which went against the land of Judea were put to flight, and that Lysias, who went forth first with a great power, was driven away of the Jews, and that they were made strong by the armor and power and store of spoils which they had gotten of the armies whom they had destroyed. Also that they had pulled down the abomination which he had set up upon the altar in Jerusalem, and that they had compassed about the sanctuary with high walls as before, and his city Bethsura. Now when the king heard these words, he was astonished and sore moved. Whereupon he laid him down upon his bed and fell sick for grief, because it had not befallen him as he looked for. And there he continued many days, for his grief was ever more and more, and he made account that he should die. Wherefore he called for all his friends, and said unto them, The sleep is gone from mine eyes, and my heart faileth for very care. And I thought with myself, Into what tribulation am I come, and how great a flood of misery is it, wherein now I am, for I was bountiful and beloved in my power. But now I remember the evils that I did at Jerusalem, and that I took all the vessels of gold and silver that were therein, and sent to destroy the inhabitants of Judea without a cause. I perceive therefore that for this cause these troubles are come upon me, and behold, I perish through great grief in a strange land. Then called he for Philip, one of his friends, who he had made ruler over all his realm, and gave him the crown and his robe and his signet, to the end he should bring up his son Antiochus and nourish him up for the kingdom. So King Antiochus died there in the 149th year. Now when Lysias knew that the king was dead, he set up Antiochus his son, whom he had brought up being young, to reign in his stead, and his name he called Eupator. About this time that they that were in the tower shut up the Israelites round about the sanctuary, and sought always their hurt, and the strengthening of the heathen. Wherefore Judas, purposing to destroy them, called all the people together to besiege them. So they came together and besieged them in the 150th year, and he made mounts for shot against them, and other engines. Howbeit certain of them that were besieged got forth, unto whom some ungodly men of Israel joined themselves. And they went unto the king and said, How long will it be ere thou execute judgment and avenge our brethren? We have been willing to serve thy father, and to do as he would have us, and to obey his commandments. For which cause they of our nation besieged the tower, that are alienated from us. Moreover, as many of us they could light on, they slew and spoiled our inheritance. Neither have they stretched out their hand against us only, but also against their borders. And behold, this day are they besieging the tower of Jerusalem, to take it. The sanctuary also Bethsura have they fortified. Wherefore, if thou dost not prevent them quickly, they will do the greater things than these, neither shalt thou be able to rule them. Now when the king heard this, he was angry, and gathered together all his friends, and the captains of his army, and those that had charge of the horse. There came also unto him from other kingdoms, and from isles of the sea, bands of hired soldiers, so that the numbers of his army was 100,000 footmen, and 20,000 horsemen, and 32 elephants exercised in battle. These went through Idumea, and pitched against Bethsura, which they assaulted many days, making engines of war. But they of Bethsura came out, and burned them with fire, and fought valiantly. Upon this Judas removed from the tower, and pitched it Beth Zacharias over against the king's camp. Then the king, rising very early, marched fiercely with his host toward Beth Zacharias, where his armies made them ready to battle, and sounded the trumpets. And to the end they might provoke the elephants to fight, they showed them the blood of grapes and mulberries. Moreover, they divided the beasts among the armies, and for every elephant they appointed 1,000 men, armed with coats of mail, and with helmets of brass on their heads. And besides this, For every beast were ordained 500 horsemen of the best. They were ready at every occasion, wheresoever the beast was, and whithersoever the beast went. They went also, neither departed they from him. And upon the beasts were there strong towers of wood, which covered every one of them, and were girt fast unto them with devices. There were also upon every one 32 strong men that fought upon them, beside the Indian that ruled him. And for the remnant of the horsemen they set them on the side and that side at the two parts of the host, giving them signs what to do, and being harnessed all over amidst the ranks. Now when the sun shone upon the shields of gold and brass, the mountains glistened therewith, and shine like lamps of fire. So part of the king's army being spread upon the high mountains, and part of the valleys below, they marched on safely and in order. Wherefore all that heard the noise of their multitude, and the marching of their company, and the rattling of the harness, were moved, for the army was very great and mighty. Then Judas and his host drew near and entered into battle, and there were slain of the king's army 600 men. Eleazar also, surnamed Savarin, perceiving that one of the beasts armed with royal harness was higher than all the rest, and supposing that the king was upon him, put himself in jeopardy to the end he might deliver his people and get him a perpetual name. Wherefore he ran upon him courageously through the midst of the battle, slaying on the right hand and on the left, so that there were divided from him on both sides. Which done, he crept under the elephant, and thrust him under, and slew him, whereupon the elephant fell down upon him, and there he died. So he died a hero. Howbeit the rest of the Jews, seeing the strength of the king and the violence of his forces, turned away from them. Then the king's army went up to Jerusalem to meet them, and the king pitched his tents against Judea, and again against Mount Sion. But with them that were in Bethsura he made peace, for they came out of the city, because they had no victuals there to endure the siege, it being a year of rest to the land. So the king took Bethsura, and set a garrison there to keep it. As for the sanctuary, he besieged it many days, and set there artillery with engines, and instruments to cast fire and stones, and pieces to cast darts and slings. Whereupon they also made engines against their engines, and held them battle a long season. Yet at the last, their vessels being without victuals, for that it was the 7th year, and they in Judea, that were delivered from the Gentiles, had eaten up the residue of the store. There were but a few left in the sanctuary, because the famine did so prevail against them, that they were fain to disperse themselves, every man to his own place. At that time Lysias heard say that Philip, whom Antiochus the king, whiles he lived, had appointed to bring up his son Antiochus, that he might be king, was returned out of Persia and Media, and the king's host also that went with him, and that he sought to take unto him the ruling of the affairs. Wherefore he went in all haste, and said to the king and the captains of the host and the company, We decay daily, and our victuals are but small, and the place we lay siege unto is strong, and the affairs of the kingdom lie upon us. Now therefore let us be friends with these men, and make peace with them, and with all their nation, and covenant with them that they shall live after their laws, as they did before. For they are therefore displeased, and have done all these things, because we abolished their laws. So the king and the princes were content, wherefore he sent unto them to make peace, and they accepted thereof. Also the king and the princes made an oath unto them, whereupon they went out of the stronghold. Then the king entered into Mount Sion, but when he saw the strength of the place, he broke his oath that he had made, and gave commandment to pull down the wall round about it. Afterward departed he in all haste, and returned unto Antiochia, where he found Philip to be master of the city. So he fought against him, and took the city by force. Alright, that's it for tonight. My eyes are blah. So it's late anyways. Wow, it's 11:30. So thanks for listening. Good night.